You're calling small caps and very prescient. But before we get to stocks, let's talk about the Fed. Because every day it seems like we get another Fed headline. Win this, win that. Does it matter to you? Should it matter to us and our viewers if the Fed begins to, quote, taper in September or December? Does that matter, or is it more the act of tapering?
I think this is one of the best communicated stories out there by the Federal Reserve. I think they're conditioning the markets to prepare for that time when they begin to slow the bond buying and begin tapering. Brian, I think that it really doesn't matter. I think the market's expecting it. I think economic conditions remain very strong. I think they're leaving themselves as much optionality as they possibly can as they monitor the Delta variant and what potential impact that could have on the economy.
I mean, it matters to the bond market, I'm sure, and stock investors may care if there's short-term trading. But to your point, and I asked that, Dan, because we know they are going to taper. It may get delayed by a bit, but it's going to happen. So how do we, or how should we have already set up perhaps our investments to account for that, or maybe not at all?
The best gauge, though, is what's going on with 10-year Treasury yields, which, as you talked about many times with Scott Minerd and others, yields have dropped more recently. So clearly the bond market is expressing concerns about the potential for growth right now. I think as they begin to taper, it'll be you'll know quite quickly through 10-year Treasury yields what the impact is. I don't think that it changes liquidity because, again, what's different this time than perhaps when we've tapered in the past is you have extraordinary spending on the part of Congress. I mean, that was always missing in the past. We've always had the monetary stimulus. Now we've got the fiscal stimulus to offset perhaps some of the draining of liquidity there.
Yeah, I mean, think about that. We're talking about the taper in the bond market, but yet we're also talking about another $3.5 trillion potential spending plan. That's not, and we're not talking about the one that just got passed by the Senate. This would be the next one. Now, some people think it's not going to get done. It'll get pared back, maybe 2.5, 3, 1.5, whatever the number might be. That could counter any taper, could it not? Because we're adding trillions in spending to the American economy, debt funded, by the way, for the next number of decades, probably.
Yeah, and I do think you're exactly right. I think that these are not foregone conclusions that, in fact, that's actually going to get through the House. I think there's going to be a very vigorous dialogue back and forth between both parties about how much is the right amount of spending to be done. Look, I'm somewhat optimistic because we are going to get I do think the infrastructure bill is likely to happen. The other spending, in my opinion, is probably not needed and probably causes other problems, inflationary pressures down the road. But we'll see what happens. And, as Dan Clifton from Strategas has pointed out, if they have to raise taxes to pay for that, higher taxes means lower profits. And that's something that the market has not calibrated yet, because I think it's questioning the likelihood of that second huge amount of stimulus that would where tax increases would go along with it.
Somebody somehow will have to pay for it. Debt does have to be paid back. Very quickly, Dan, leave us with an idea, some optimism this morning. Tell us about Repligen.
Yeah, so it's time to get more exposed to, generally speaking, to small cap stocks. Repligen is a great example of what we like to look for. Dawn Brack, my healthcare analyst, did outstanding work on this. We started buying the shares in 2015 when it was a 500 million market cap company. It's now about 14 billion. This is a company in the bioprocessing space. very similar dynamics that are driving the growth here, that are driving the growth for Danaher, which we spoke about some time ago. And I think this company is incredibly well positioned. They've done a great job on the capital allocation side, which, as we've talked about before, is very important to how we like to invest. They've made highly strategic acquisitions that I think position them incredibly well. And, COVID-19 is going to be with us for a while from the standpoint of the further mutations, and that plays well into the business opportunity for Repligen.